Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Is this on? Well, after what Matt just said, I don't have to say anything. No. First of all, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. Matt, I know this has been years. I appreciate it. And Bob, I'm not sure where you are. There you are, sir. It's been great getting to know you also. Matt was, if you don't mind, I'll walk around a little bit. Matt was such a great officer. In fact, he is, and looking at his parents there, you raised such a great son. He was the one that got away, as far as I'm concerned. Back in 2000, when he said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving the Army, I said, what? We have plans for you, Matt. We want you leading battalions someday, and brigades and more than that. But Matt and Liz had a plan. There's Liz. Matt and Liz had a plan, and they have now executed it, and wow. The Army's loss is certainly Greenville's gain, because Matt and Liz are such a wonderful couple. So thank you so much. Before I go on, a lot of things happening. A lot of phones are going off here. Is when you're in a military setting and the phones start going off, what that means is people are trying to get in touch with you because something's going on in the world. So when I hear that, it's like, we got to watch out. I just want to recognize a couple of some friends and guests that are here that haven't been recognized yet. I have Ann Stevens, who's a friend of ours, and her husband Ron was a battalion commander. He and I were battalion commanders together at Fort Lewis, Washington. And Ann, I'm so glad you're here. Came up from Georgia to be here. And Cliff Vickers is an Army chaplain, and we were together in Germany, and he had that old-time religion. It really resonated. And I finally asked one day, where are you from? He said, South Carolina. And he's a person who's heard of Due West, South Carolina. How many people heard of Due West, South Carolina? Oh, okay. Well, hardly anybody else in the Army's heard of Due West, South Carolina. But he's from that area and now lives in the mountains somewhere in Tennessee. So thank you for being here, Cliff. And thank you for your spiritual mentorship over the years. Of Ann Hutzel, who used to be with Babb and Brown, a law firm here, and has been very helpful to my family with property issues and things like that. I always will appreciate that, Ann. And she was a bulldog in making sure that things got done. And Stuart James, who has been our attorney with property now for years and has helped us do a number of things here in South Carolina. And then my classmate from West Point, David Griffin, who is here. He and I are on the reunion committee, our 40th reunion committee, which will be next year. And it'll be 40 years in May that we graduated from West Point. And our guest speaker for that graduation was President Ronald Reagan. And I'll never forget, as he was coming in, no one even had to say anything. We all just stood up and just started cheering. Because that was one of his first major speaking events after the assassination attempt in February 1981. So now we go up to May 1981. And we were just so happy he was there. And he handed diplomas to the top 50 graduates. I wasn't one of them. But to his credit, he stood up for every one of us and shook our hands. And I don't know what he said to you, but I'll never forget what he said to me. He shook my hand and said 3 words: do good things. It was like coming from, the voice from God. That was my mission. So for 34 years serving in uniform, that's what I attempted to do, was do good things for our country. And so thank you for being here, David. And also A.T. Smith. You know him as Tommy. I know him as A.T. Smith. I had the pleasure over the years of, I think, either meeting or serving with 6 presidents overall. And one I was military aide to the president. That was President Bill Clinton. But when I was chosen, it was August of 1996. So I didn't know who I'd be serving. Would it be, President Bill Clinton, or would it be Senator Bob Dole? So it didn't matter, because in the military, you're apolitical. You serve the office of the president, you serve our country. But while serving for President Clinton, I reported in November 1996, and I stayed to the very end of the impeachment trial in January of 1999. I often saw A.T. Smith, who had a difficult job. He was the head of the detail, I believe, for the First Lady. Why was it difficult? It was difficult because First Lady did a lot of things, and his skill set was protective, but he also had to be a diplomat in many ways. And the First Lady and her staff were cool. They were neat to work with. I always liked the trips where she came along, because her staff was so cool. They would help me find something for Lucille, my wife Lucille, wherever we were in the world. Like in Morocco, it was their idea to get those black Moroccan pearls, honey. But really a skill, really a skill. So A.T., just really good to see you. People just don't know just how professional the Secret Service is. Just so professional. And what we're asking them to do in protecting our leaders, our presidents and their families. So A.T., great to see you. And then my cousin, Freddie Woods, who was an attorney here. He was raised in Greenville. I was thinking of Greenwood, where we had that court case, but Greenville, South Carolina here. We're all very, very proud of him. He's got 6 different law offices now in South Carolina, North Carolina. He represents so much of the values of our family, and I'll talk about that through education. Both his parents were principals. His mother, cousin, was Principal of the Year and Teacher of the Year, and received the coveted Palmetto Award, Order of the Palmetto, twice. I guess the second governor who was going to do it, she didn't mention that she'd already had it, but received it twice. So very, very proud. I'm so glad that you're here, Freddie, and your friends. And then my co-author, and he's already been mentioned, Wes Bryant. He's a special ops, Air Force special ops, has multiple tours to all over the world. Afghanistan, Iraq are just some of the places. He's a black belt in, I don't know, Kung Fu, Tai Chi, I don't know what, but so many different things. And he's a wild man, and you'll see that when you read the book. But good to have you and your lovely family here, Katie and 2 daughters, London and Berlin, named after World War II battles, in a way, as far as bombing. So Air Force folks. Profoundly affected yesterday by the tour Lucille and I had of the Legacy Early College program. Profoundly affected by that. And so I just want to really kind of talk about that just a little bit. When William Brown gave us a personal tour, well, and I know many of you know William Brown, was so inspired by what he is doing, using private funds as well as public funds, putting all that together and creating this environment for students, the vast majority of which are underprivileged economically minorities. So I asked William, what is inspiring you to do this? He said, because I've had so much in my life. I've had so many opportunities that a number of people don't have. And it is my firm belief, and this is William talking, is my firm belief that everyone given a chance through education in a level playing field will do equally well. And when he said that, that resonated, because that's been a belief of my family also. And so today, I'd like to announce that my wife and I have agreed that we're going to fund a scholarship for graduates of that school Be a small scholarship, not a real big one, but it'll be in perpetuity. And if 50 of us do that, 100 of us do that, that will take care of that. Because their goal is not just 100% graduation from the school. They got that. It's 100% acceptance to college. They have that. Now their next goal is 100% graduating from the college and having the funds to do that. And they're doing all sorts of innovative ways to do that. But now there's going to be a scholarship fund that will help at least some of them. So, Lucille, thank you. Now, I know they didn't have my bio out, and Matt talked about that. But if you read my bio, I'm from Texas, El Paso, Texas. Wife's from Kansas. Came from a military family. My dad was in the military. I started out as a private in 1950, and then retired as an Army Lieutenant Colonel in 1970. My mother was a mathematician, and she was also a Department of the Army civilian for years. And if you saw the movie Hidden Figures, there's a way that she was kind of like that in many ways. In the 1950s, she was the project mathematician for the Hawk Missile Project, which is a surface-to-air missile that the U.S. Army has used for decades. And she was the only African-American woman there at White Sands Missile Range doing that. Very, very proud of that. But what you don't hear in that bio is where the values and where the roots came from. Those roots came from right here in South Carolina. 45 miles south of here, in a place called Due West. My great-grandfather, who's Fred's great-great-grandfather, Jackson Woods, was a sharecropper here in South Carolina. And slowly but surely, he bought up the land that he was able to sharecrop on, and eventually had about 60 acres, which we have now. And on that 60 acres, he built this home. And now that it still exists, it's a dilapidated building now, but it still stands. He had 10 children that were born there, 7 sons and 3 daughters. His oldest daughter was my grandmother, Utensi Woods Hillian, who was born in that little building that still exists in 1901. They believed in education. They didn't have much of anything, but they believed in education. Sent all of his kids to school. My grandmother was sent to Coulter Academy, which was near Cheraw, where she met my grandfather. They got married in 1925. And after getting married, my grandmother was just this strong-willed person and outspoken. Dang, well, where I got that from? But she did not like being under Jim Crow laws here in the South. It was our version of apartheid. She probably would have been killed the way she was so outspoken. So she and my grandfather, looking for opportunities for the future, immigrated or migrated to the north, to Philadelphia in 1925. And eventually, 5 of her siblings followed her, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And her house in Philadelphia, this row house, 3-story row house, became this way station for 7 to 8 years. And as her siblings and their families came through, not for weeks, not for months, but for years, until they got their own homes. And they all lived near each other in North Philadelphia. Now, that sounds like a pretty good story, but the North was not the promised land that everybody thought it was. White people in the North really didn't want them there. A number of black people in the North didn't want them there because they had been there the black people in the North had been there for generations and had come from free people, and they thought, well, these Southern blacks, they're going to ruin it for us. They're going to bring more crime. So they weren't welcome necessarily. But there's 2 areas where the folks were welcoming. One was the church. The church. In fact, they belonged to Zion Baptist Church there in 1925, and our family to this day has members in that church in Philadelphia. And number 2, black Republicans. The Black Republican Party, or Republicans who happen to be black in the party, embraced them. registered them to vote. And the first presidential election that they voted in was 1928. And it was Herbert Hoover that they voted for. And now our family, people always ask me, why are you a Republican? Well, we've had generations of Republicans. Our entire family's Republican. I've been Republican my entire life. But that came from the welcoming from the black Republicans in Philadelphia way back when. And then when it came time for my mother to be born, my grandmother came back from Philadelphia back to South Carolina. And my mother was also born in that dilapidated little house that still exists today. So roots came from here. And we talk legacy and values. The values of our family, and it was, again, based on education, too. My grandparents believed that they would only have as many children as they could afford. So they had one, my mother. Most all of our relatives who went north had very few children because it was the industrial north. Again, this was all during the great African-American migration in the 1920s, 1930s. Four brothers, like I said, remained back in South Carolina. One of them, my Uncle Rufus, his great-grandfather, had 16 children, because again, it was the rural South. So many of my family members live here. But there's been one and a couple constants in that. One is love of God and having unshakable faith. Number two is education. Education is the way to move forward. Number three was a work ethic. They took their rural agrarian work ethic. You had to get up in the morning and milk those cows and use it up in the north. And we, as a family, still have that today. Four was savings. It's not what you earn, it's what you save. I know we have a bunch of bankers here and you'd like to hear that, but it really is. It's not just what you earn, it's what you save and invest in the future. And last, vote. And every election my grandmother voted in from 1928 to 2004. And bless her heart, she passed away just 3 months shy of the age of 105 in 2006. Unshakable faith. So, again, profoundly affected by our visit to the Legacy Early College program. Well, I know it's a military lecture series, and some people have already said, well, are you going to talk about ISIS? Well, yes. Just give you a little context. It's now 2014. And at that time, ISIS, many of us were watching ISIS. I was in the Middle East. I was with CENTCOM, so I was living between, I was away from home for a year, but living between Jordan, Kuwait, and a couple trips up to Iraq, just to monitor what was going on. But ISIS at that time was still really in Syria. And then ISIS attacked northern Iraq in June of 2014, and this is the beginning of the book, in 2014, and took over Iraq's second largest city of Mosul with over 1 million people. That sent alarm bells throughout the region, the Middle East, and even back here in America. Because what ISIS was able to do, different from other insurgent groups that we have fought since 9/11, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's in Somalia, whether it's all around the world, ISIS created an army that they could field, and an army that would go toe-to-toe with the Syrian army, the Iraqi army. And 5 Iraqi divisions, equivalents, were defeated outside of Mosul. And it became almost a massacre in many ways. Well, those alarm bells came, and the thought at the time was that ISIS would continue moving down from north to south, down the Tigris River Valley, and then from west to east along the Euphrates, and take Baghdad. That was absolutely what conventional wisdom was telling people. So at that time, what did President Obama do? Well, he sent a force to try to secure the embassy, and then he sent 300 special operators, including West Bryant, and then 100 staff to set up a footprint there and then me. It's like, so what are you going to do? They got on the ground and assessed the situation. We were told in about a week, let our leadership know and the White House know what we saw. Well, within 24 hours, I told them what I saw, which is ISIS was an existential threat that we had to do something about. We had to. Nobody wanted to hear that back then. And part of that was, President Obama was elected to get us out of conflict. He got us out of Iraq in 2011. He had raised the troop level in Afghanistan, but was reducing it back down. He was trying to get us out of war. The last thing anybody wanted was another war in the Middle East. Let the Iraqis fight it. We understood that feeling, but Iraq was a democracy that we helped form. We helped develop that democracy, and they were an independent state at that point. But now, a third of Iraq's territory was taken by ISIS, and they were still coming down. So we got pushback, and there was nothing that we couldn't do airstrikes or anything at that point. So we still had to watch. So what was good is our systems of unmanned and manned aerial systems throughout the world that were focused on the area. So we got to just watch and learn as much as we could about ISIS until we could change that. Well, luckily ISIS made some mistakes. And one mistake that they made was to attack the Kurds. Once they tried to attack the regional headquarters of the Kurds, then President Obama relented a little bit and said, okay, you can support airstrikes, but he restricted us to an area. He said, he told his advisors, it can only be a certain area, so it came back down to us is draw a little area. So I did. I drew it as wide as I could, so we were able to do that. Now, once we did that, we still weren't allowed to do a whole lot more at that point. But we requested if we could use strategic targets, if we could protect strategic targets in Iraq. Because at that time, again, it's 2014, it was only 2 years after Benghazi, where we lost our ambassador and 3 other Americans, 4 American lives lost. Nobody wanted to go through that again. Nobody wanted to lose an embassy. So again, when arrived on the ground, the embassy in Baghdad had already been, a third of them had been evacuated, and they thought that the embassy would go too. And then that's kind of the gist of the initial part of the book. So once we got permission to look at strategic targets, then I drew bigger circles. And I drew bigger circles around all the strategic targets in Iraq, and then we showed them individually, I guess, to the White House. Again, it's amazing that we had to get permission from the White House to do that. But when they saw each of them, they said, okay, that's approved, that's approved. What they didn't know is that if you put it all together, it covered all of Iraq. So I gave myself permission to attack ISIS everywhere. And that is where Wes Bryant came in, with bringing in these forward air controllers, JTACs, to be able to do these airstrikes. And they were all very, very risky to an extent, because they're very, very close. We didn't want to destroy the infrastructure, but we absolutely wanted to get after ISIS. And ISIS stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, by the way. It's also called ISIL, it's also called Daesh, but it's ISIS. And they were very, very brutal. The Iraqi army was demoralized, and in many ways, we became their backbone for a while until they could get their swagger back. But watching ISIS, we then detected some things that they were doing. One is their leaders were actually very courageous. I mean, we don't want to give too much credit to the enemy, but their leaders were very courageous. In fact, even at the senior level, their leaders would show up on the battlefield to encourage their fighters. So with that epiphany, we discovered, okay, these engagements we're doing with the Iraqis, everybody thinks they're doing engagements, but what it really is, it's a leadership ambush. So within the first 8 months, 40 of the top 50 ISIS leaders were killed. So after a while, ISIS kind of understood that, and fewer of their leaders would show up on the battlefield. So it started taking more and more away from their command and control as we were able to do that. Matt has told me that we can do a Q&A, so I can stop there and answer any questions that you may have overall. Sir?
Bringing up the Kurds, I assume you've worked with them. In northern Syria, we had also used them to fight our advocates or our proxies. How do you feel about what happened when we suddenly pulled our forces out? And does that make sense to you?
Sure. There's a couple things on the Kurds. We knew that with ISIS, it was all about momentum. ISIS had tactical momentum against the Iraqi security forces. That's on the ground. They had an operational momentum as far as their tempo and timing, and they had a strategic momentum because they were on their airwaves, and the rest of the world thought they're invincible. In fact, they would put out media-wise 90,000 tweets a day. It's like, whoa. So we had to counter all that. But in changing that dynamic, we needed different forces on the ground in different places so that we could change the momentum to where instead of, after a successful battle, there's an example in the book where the General Kanani, who's in charge of the Iraqi security forces, says, oh, that's good, we just won. Oh, well, let's see where ISIS is going to attack us next. I said, ISIS attacks us next. It is now our turn to choose where we're going to hit ISIS. And that's a back and forth we had. But we needed different forces to do that. So at one point, there were 15 different fronts where ISIS was fighting, where we were fighting ISIS. And ISIS didn't know, they now had to parry our blows instead of planning to attack our forces.